My father left me an inheritance, but it wasn't a gift. It was a burden. When the lawyer read the will, my family thought they were getting a piece of the good life property, wealth, the freedom to live comfortably. But what no one knew was that I had inherited far more than they expected. I inherited the family's debts, their lies, and the weight of a legacy that had been kept hidden from all of us. My name's Greg Daniels, and I never thought I'd find out how deep the secrets ran until my father's death threw everything into the open. At 45, I thought I had finally gotten everything in my life on track. I had built a solid career, an enviable position in the corporate world, and a quiet life that was mine to control. But when my father unexpectedly passed away, the ground beneath my feet began to shift. I thought the will would be straightforward. After all, I had never been my father's favorite, but I figured he'd at least leave me something to show I mattered. But when the will reading came, nothing prepared me for what was about to unfold. It was a family gathering like any other, or at least it seemed so at first. My mother, Evelyn, sat beside my younger sister Megan, with her ever-present smug smile, like everything in the world was just the way it should be. Megan had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. She had inherited all of Dad's attention growing up, and she was the one everyone expected to take over the family business when Dad retired. I had always been the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who got the job done without asking for any recognition. But deep down, I'd always hoped that when the time came, I'd finally get my moment. When the lawyer began reading the will, Megan and Mom leaned forward, eager to hear what my father had left them. Megan's perfectly manicured fingers were fidgeting with her glass of wine, and Mom's eyes twinkled with anticipation. But as the lawyer continued, something shifted in the room. The more he read, the more confused everyone seemed. Finally, when he finished, he turned to me and handed me a sealed envelope. "The late Mr. Daniels has left you something," he said almost reluctantly. My family turned toward me in disbelief. Megan's face contorted with confusion. My mother's smile faltered, just for a second. What did he leave me? I was the outsider, after all. Was this some kind of mistake? But as the lawyer handed me the deed to a sprawling estate in the countryside, something clicked. My father had left me property, a family estate he had been hiding for years. But it wasn't just any property. This was something far more valuable than anything I had ever expected. Land, resources, and a building with more than just sentimental value. I had never known about this estate. My father had kept it secret from the family for years, buried in paperwork that no one had bothered to ask about, no one except me. And now, here I was, holding the deed to the estate that none of them knew existed. I looked at Megan and my mom. Their smiles faded, replaced with confusion. My heart began to race. Was this some kind of sick joke? I had been left the most valuable asset in the family, and yet I knew none of them had any idea what it meant. They had all been living a lie, thinking they were entitled to everything that came with Dad's name. I stood there, holding the deed, staring at the reactions around me. My mother's eyes narrowed, and Megan's lips tightened in annoyance. My father had left me more than just property. He had left me the entire weight of the family's secrets, the debts, the failed investments, the lies about where the money had gone. But I stayed quiet, letting them celebrate, letting them laugh it off. They had no clue what was coming next. What they didn't know was that the real legacy my father had left me wasn't wealth, it was a web of deceit that would change everything. As the lawyer's voice faded into the background, I stood there, still holding the deed to my father's estate, watching my family's reactions with a mix of disbelief and anger. Megan's mouth hung open, and my mother's polite smile was gone. She looked at me, trying to mask her frustration with a calm exterior, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. What is this?" Megan blurted out. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure what to say. The truth was, I didn't have an explanation. How could I? I was just as confused as they were. But, unlike them, I had spent the last few years uncovering the truth about my father's hidden empire. The land, the buildings, the resources I had been quietly gathering everything he had left behind, piece by piece. In that moment, standing in front of my family, I realized how deeply my father had deceived us all. I wasn't sure whether to be angry at him or at myself for never digging deeper into his finances before. He had always been the stoic, controlling father, and I had been too busy with my own life to challenge the world he had built around us. But now that everything had been laid out before me, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what had been kept from us. Megan, who had always been the family's golden child, suddenly lost her charm. Her eyes darted from the deed in my hands to my face, as if she were trying to figure out how I had managed to outsmart her. She had always been the one who got what she wanted. She was the one Dad always praised for doing the bare minimum. But now, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Mom?" Megan said, her voice shaky, trying to get my mother's attention. "This doesn't make sense. Why would Dad leave this to Greg? He's never even shown interest in anything like this." My mother, sitting silently beside Megan, avoided my gaze. I could see the discomfort in her face, the way she shifted in her seat. I'd always been the one to take care of things, the one who kept the family business afloat when my father couldn't, the one who had picked up the pieces of his mistakes when he refused to. But even then, my efforts had gone unnoticed. To them, I had always been the quiet son, the one who didn't ask for attention. I looked at my mom and said, "Dad left me more than just property. He left me everything he didn't want anyone to know. The debts, the failed investments, the money he hid from you all. You really didn't think I'd find out, did you?" Megan's face flushed, and my mother's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I could tell that neither of them knew what to say. They hadn't seen this coming, and, to be honest, neither had I. But now that the truth was out, there was no way they could avoid it. "Greg," my mother finally said, her voice strained, "you don't understand. This wasn't meant for you. You don't know how to manage this. It was supposed to go to Megan. She's getting married. She's settling down. You're still figuring things out. You don't need this." I blinked. My mom, who had always been the passive one, the one who let everything slide, was now trying to justify why this property was meant for Megan. And in that moment, I realized that nothing would ever change. I had spent my whole life trying to prove myself to them, to get them to see that I was more than just the dependable son. But now I understood. I would never be enough for them. No matter how hard I worked, no matter what I achieved, I would always be the one who wasn't good enough. I looked around the room, at Megan's smirk, my mother's forced calm, my father's absence, and I felt something inside me snap. They had never really seen me. They had never really cared about my hard work, my sacrifices. It was always about what they could take. And now, as I stood there holding the key to everything they had tried to deny me, I realized I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance, I was fighting for the respect I had never been given. I handed the deed to Megan, who looked at it in disbelief, her perfect world shattering in front of her. But she wasn't the one who deserved it. I was. And as the lawyer closed the documents, I knew one thing for sure. I had nothing to prove anymore. The family who had ignored me for so long had no idea what was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be me who walked away. It would be them. The tension in the room was palpable as I stood there, holding the deed to my father's estate, watching my family try to make sense of what had just happened. Megan's face was a mix of confusion and anger, while my mother, ever the peacekeeper, was silently struggling to understand why things hadn't gone the way she expected. They had thought the estate was meant for Megan after all. She was the one who had always been Dad's pride and joy. But I had known better. I had known there was more to this than they had let on. As the minutes passed, I could feel the weight of my father's secret pressing down on me. He had spent so many years manipulating the narrative, making sure everyone believed his carefully crafted version of events. And I had spent years, decades, even playing along, quietly doing the work behind the scenes, always hoping that one day he would see me for who I truly was. But that day never came. I turned and walked to the study, where I had already begun sifting through the boxes of my father's old files. I needed answers I was never meant to find, but that were now mine to uncover. My mind raced as I flipped through pages of financial records, old contracts, and property deeds. Slowly, a picture began to form, a picture that was far darker than I had ever imagined. What I found, buried beneath the neat stacks of paperwork, were documents that detailed everything my father had tried so desperately to hide: debts, questionable investments, and businesses that were sinking without a trace. The estate I had just inherited wasn't just a piece of land, it was a cover-up. My father had been using the property to hide his financial failures from the family. Every single one of those debts, those bad investments, those mismanaged funds, had been buried here, tucked away under layers of lies. And that wasn't all. As I dug deeper, I found something that made my stomach turn: a series of offshore accounts where my father had hidden large sums of money he never told anyone about. This was the money that had kept the family living in comfort, while the rest of his finances crumbled. The money he had used to fund the life he wanted us to believe in. But the truth was, my father had been living a double life one, where he had sacrificed everything, including his own family's future, just to maintain the illusion of success. I could feel my anger building as I continued to sift through the papers. But it wasn't just anger, it was a deep, aching realization that I had been part of a grand deception. All those years I had spent trying to prove myself, trying to win my father's approval, had been wasted. He had never cared about me. He had never cared about what I had done for the family. To him, I was just a tool to keep his carefully constructed world intact, a world that didn't actually exist. As I stared at the documents in front of me, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Megan, her face a mixture of confusion and desperation. She had followed me into the study, probably hoping to convince me to hand over the estate, to return to the family fold and play my part in the illusion they had created. But this time, I wasn't willing to play along. "Megan," I said, my voice steady, "you have no idea what's really going on here. You think this property is just a gift, something Dad handed over to you as a reward for getting married. But it's not. It's part of a bigger lie." Megan's eyes narrowed, her smirk returning. "What are you talking about, Greg?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Dad left me the estate because I'm the one who's actually settled down. You're just, well, you're still figuring it out, aren't you?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I've been figuring it out for years, Megan. While you've been getting everything handed to you, I've been working behind the scenes to keep this family afloat. But none of you ever noticed, did you? None of you ever cared enough to see what I was doing." The silence that followed was deafening. Megan didn't know what to say. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But now, I was pulling back the curtain, showing her the ugly truth. And she wasn't ready for it. "I never wanted this, Megan," I continued, my voice cold and unwavering. "But now that I know the truth, I'm not just going to hand it over to you. I'm going to take control of what's mine." The look on her face was priceless confusion, disbelief, and a hint of fear. She had never expected this. She had never expected me to challenge her, to take control of something that she had always believed was hers by default. But this wasn't just about the estate. This was about reclaiming everything I had worked for, everything I had been denied for years. And no matter what Megan or anyone else thought, I wasn't going to back down. The family I had spent my life trying to please was about to learn that I wasn't the same Greg they had always underestimated. I was done playing by their rules, and now the truth was coming to light. I had always been the quiet one, the one who did what was asked of him, who never stirred the pot, who kept the family together while everyone else enjoyed the fruits of my labor. But standing in the study, holding the secrets of my father's empire in my hands, I realized something. I was done being the invisible son. I was done trying to win their approval. Now, it was time for them to see the truth. Megan had left the study with that same confused look, and I knew she was processing everything I had just told her, trying to come to terms with the fact that she had been living a lie. But I wasn't going to wait for her to figure it out. I needed to confront my family, lay it all out, and show them what they had never bothered to understand about me. The time for silence was over. The time for proving myself was over. Now, it was time for them to see the person I had become, the person they had refused to acknowledge. I called a family meeting. My mother and father reluctantly agreed, though I could tell they weren't thrilled by the idea. But this wasn't about them anymore. This was about me, and if they wanted to keep pretending that everything was fine, they would have to do it without me. When we sat down at the dining table, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Megan, sitting across from me, couldn't look me in the eye. My father was sitting with his usual posture, stoic, unmoving, as if he were trying to maintain control over the situation. But I wasn't intimidated. I had the truth on my side, and it was stronger than anything they could throw at me. "Let's get this out in the open," I said, my voice firm. "I know everything. I know about the debts, the hidden investments, the lies you've told to keep up appearances. I know how you've manipulated everything and everyone around you, including me." The silence was deafening. My mother looked away, her face flushed with guilt. While my father's jaw tightened, Megan's eyes flickered nervously, and I knew she was struggling to process what I was saying. She had always lived in a bubble of privilege, believing that everything had been handed to her on a silver platter, but now she was beginning to realize that nothing was as it seemed. "Greg, this is nonsense," my father said, trying to brush it off. "You're just making things up to make us feel guilty. You've always been bitter about the way things went down, but you need to stop trying to make us the villains." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I'm not making anything up, Dad. You've been the villain all along. You've kept us all in the dark while you played the perfect father, the perfect businessman. But I'm the one who's been cleaning up your mess all these years, and now it's time to own up to the truth." Megan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I don't get it, Greg," she said. "Why didn't you tell us this sooner? Why didn't you just ask for help?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Ask for help? You never once asked me what I was doing, Megan. You were too busy living your perfect life to notice what was going on behind the scenes. And that's the problem, isn't it? None of you ever cared enough to ask." My father's face darkened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of emotion in his eye, anger, fear, maybe even shame. "You don't understand, Greg," he said, his voice low. "I did this for you. I did this for all of you." "For me?" I echoed, incredulously. "You didn't do anything for me, Dad. You did it for yourself. You built your empire on lies and manipulation, and you thought you could get away with it forever. But you're wrong. You can't hide the truth forever." The air in the room grew heavy with silence as my words hung in the air. I had never spoken like this before, and it felt good to finally say everything I had been holding in for so long. But even as I spoke, I knew that the truth wouldn't be enough. They weren't going to understand me, not in the way I wanted them to. They were too set in their ways, too committed to their own version of reality. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Greg, I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was protecting you all, but now I see. I see that I failed you." I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to accuse her of being complicit in all the lies. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded. "You didn't fail me, Mom. You just never saw me." The weight of the moment hung in the air like a cloud, and for the first time in my life, I realized that I wasn't the one who needed to be seen. They were the ones who needed to wake up, to see the reality of everything they had done to me, but I wasn't going to wait for that anymore. I stood up, my decision clear. "I'm done," I said. "This family is toxic. You've all been living in a lie, and I'm done trying to fix it. I'm taking control of my life now." And with that, I walked away from the table, leaving my family behind. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something I had to fight for. I was walking away from something I had outgrown. And I knew that no matter what happened next, I was finally free. The next few days after the confrontation were a blur of disbelief and finality. My family was still reeling from what I had exposed. Megan and my mother barely spoke to me, their faces a mixture of anger and guilt. My father, usually so composed, was distant, and I knew that the empire he had carefully built over the years was starting to crumble. But despite their shock, I wasn't looking back. I had finally done what I needed to do. I had walked away from a family that had never truly seen me. And now, I was free to build something of my own. I spent the next week sorting through everything: the estate, the papers, the countless documents that had haunted me for years. But it wasn't just about the property or the hidden wealth. It was about what I was going to do with this newfound power, this freedom I had finally claimed. I couldn't let the story end with a broken family and secrets exposed. I had to make something out of it. I had to prove to myself, and to them, that I could thrive without their approval. I called the lawyer, arranged for the estate to be sold, and started the process of distancing myself from the family business. It wasn't easy. It was a slow process of untangling myself from the web of obligations I had spent so many years maintaining. But it was necessary, and with each step, I felt lighter. The pressure that had weighed on me for so long, trying to be the son they wanted, trying to fix everything they broke, was finally starting to lift. As the days went on, I found myself spending more time at my own place, the apartment I had bought with my own money, in my own name. I realized that I had never truly lived there. It had always felt like a temporary solution, a place I had to keep up for appearances. But now, it was mine. I began to redecorate, filling it with things that represented who I was now, not who I had been. It was a fresh start, and it felt like I was finally putting down roots in a place I had never expected to find peace. One evening, as I sat on the couch with a glass of wine, going over the final details of the estate sale, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Megan. I hadn't heard from her since the confrontation. I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe an apology, maybe a last-ditch effort to convince me to come back and play my part in their perfect little world. But when I read the message, I found something I hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about everything you said. I don't get it all, but I see now what you were doing. I'm sorry. I should have listened." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. I hadn't expected her to reach out. She had always been the one who never understood, the one who never cared enough to see me. But now, I could feel her pain through the words she had written. Megan wasn't just apologizing for the estate or the way she had treated me. She was acknowledging the truth I had been trying to get through to her for so long. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I set my phone down and took a deep breath. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. This was about closure. Megan's apology didn't fix everything, and it didn't change the years of neglect, but it was a step forward. It was a small gesture of acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, she saw me for who I was now. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. I left the text unread for the next few days, not because I was angry, but because I realized something important. I didn't need her validation anymore. I had spent so many years begging for it, but I was finally standing on my own. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone. When I finally replied, I kept it simple. "Thanks, Megan. I'm glad you understand. I'm moving forward now. So should you." And just like that, I closed the door on the past. Megan responded with a simple, "Good luck, Greg. I hope you find what you're looking for." With that, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't a happy ending. There was no big reconciliation, no perfect family moment, but it didn't matter anymore. I was living for myself now. I was no longer part of their story. And that, in itself, felt like the greatest victory of all. In the months that followed, I focused on what really mattered: building my business, forging new relationships, and embracing the life I had spent so long avoiding. It wasn't always easy, and the scars of my past lingered, but with every step forward, I felt more like myself. I had finally stopped waiting to be chosen, and in doing so, I had chosen myself. The family that had once defined me was now just a distant memory. Their expectations, their judgments, their betrayals, they no longer held any power over me. I had made my own path, and I was walking it with confidence, knowing that I was the one who had written my story all along.